When it comes to the Palestinian statehood, France is now joining world leaders in recognizing that Palestinian statehood. Let's take a listen.
Today, we join over 150 countries who recognize a Palestinian state.
What I've called a Zionist Palestinian state, which is what we want.
Today, France recognizes the state of Palestine.
Behnam, my goodness. I mean, is all of this to revive peace efforts? What is going on here?
Well, that's really the million-dollar question, because there's an increasing stream of Western and particularly American allies recognizing a quote-unquote Palestinian state at this point in time. As the reporter in the field just mentioned, again, this is not all of our transatlantic partners. There was a good reference there to the Italians and the Germans taking a fundamentally different tack. This opens a lot of space for American diplomacy to try to divide and conquer much of the European continent on this issue here. But certainly, of course, this is tied to the post-October 7 wars in the Middle East, the hostage issue, and most importantly, changing demographics and politics in many European and Western countries, and what impact that has on their national security and their view of Israel. You know, fundamentally, the way the UK looks, the way the Australian government thinks and acts today is driven by a changing demographic and political component in each of their countries, which you see also, unfortunately, correlates with a strong anti-Semitist streak on their streets.
Yeah, Steve, as we've mentioned multiple times this morning, you know, Trump is expected to address the UN General Assembly at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. How do you think that he approaches this topic and the recognition of the Palestinian statehood by many of these European countries?
Well, I think the strongest way to approach it would be to point out that these leaders are doing basically hollow and counterproductive virtue signaling. It does not feed any Gazans. It does not bring any prospect of peace sooner. It has a lot more to do with trying to appease mobs in their own country that are upsetting their politics and putting pressure on them at home, not necessarily reality in theater. And ultimately, I hope that the president just leans in with, look, no president in the history of America has weighed in more heavily in the international space to try to bring peace and alternative paths to prosperity. At its core, he launched an historic move in that direction with the Abraham Accords. I think those themes resonate in all the other areas he's trying to rebalance and reorient. And so I think whether it's the UN itself deeply needing to reform, or the partners around in these regions to really lean into this strategy, he's bringing back American strength. They want to say better together. I say better get to work.
Yeah. You know, we mentioned the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We mentioned Putin. But the other side of this, of course, is Ukraine's President Zelenskyy. He will actually be getting the spotlight twice. So he will speak Tuesday with the United States, France, Japan, Malta, South Korea, and Britain. And then he will address the General Assembly Wednesday morning. Behnam, what are you expecting to hear from Zelenskyy?
Well, certainly he's going to be making a play for more support to really kind of stay in the conflict, to defend his own territory. But fundamentally, this is about keeping the Ukraine issue, which is issue number one for the Europeans, on the top of the roster for the Americans, in an issue of continued great power competition, in an issue of increased politicization of the U.S. national security debate, whether that's over Gaza or Ukraine, Iran, or potential all eyes on Taiwan and finding a way to counter the CCP. Certainly Zelenskyy is going to want to take advantage of this increased European willingness to push back on this Russian poking and prodding. And of course, the UN envoy's very firm comments about defending all of NATO territory, trying to see how far he could take that to really kind of push back on Putin altogether.
Absolutely. You know, Steve, finally, I do have to ask you this. So Russian President Vladimir Putin, and then you have China's President Xi Jinping. They're actually going to be sending their foreign ministers instead of coming themselves. So again, neither Putin nor Xi attended last year. What's the meaning behind this? So why are they not attending?
Well, in some ways, the UN General Assembly can appear to be taking place on America's home turf. I sort of consider Turtle Bay to be kind of an enclave of things that are decidedly not pro-American, but they seem to think that a lot of what they've been doing has been working outside of this structure while they stack the deck in a lot of the subordinate organizations, whether it's World Health Organization or elsewhere, to avoid the scrutiny that they deserve in some of these policy areas. And I don't think that that the leader of China is ready to sit down and meet with President Trump. They had a phone call recently. They thought they might be meeting in China before the APEC summit. That's been pushed off to early next year. They'll have a bilat in Korea when the APEC gathering happens. So I think both Putin and Xi feel like they've had their interactions with the president that they want on pace, and there's not a lot to gain. And they have a lot of supporters, especially China, has plowed the ground in the UN to get a lot of votes in their favor that they don't need to be there if their proxies vote the right way.
Yeah, I think you made some fantastic points there. Steve Yates, Behnam Ben Taleblu, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really appreciate the conversation, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks.